Hello and welcome to a video that we have done before but needed a little bit of updating, all about the world of data tables in Excel. So I want to jump right in with this data set that you see in front of you, but before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about what data tables are and how they work in Excel. So there's a little bit of confusion that can happen when you're working with Excel and you say the word data table, because there are actually quite a few types of tables that you can create in Excel. You can create pivot tables, you can create multivariable tables, both single and multivariable data tables. And the video that we're making today is all about just the basic data table in Excel. So I know what you're probably thinking. Well, am I looking at a data table right now? Well, sort of, but not really. So when you talk about data tables, you're talking about structured data. You're talking about data that is organized in a way that it's got a repetitive structure that is easy to follow. So basically your data is broken into columns and rows. Now that's what you're seeing right now. However, it has not been created as a data table in Excel. It is data organized into columns and rows with clearly labeled column headings. However, Excel doesn't recognize it as a data table. So if you wanted to create an actual data table from this data, there are a couple different ways to do that, and there are a couple different benefits that you would get from doing that. And it won't take me long, but that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. So first of all, let's just get to know our data a little bit. So what you're looking at is home sale information. Okay, so we've got someone that works as a real estate agent and they're selling homes, right? Or we'll say it's someone that owns a real estate company that sells homes. So you've got the transaction of a home being sold. That's what you see in column B. You've got the address of the home. You've got the city where it was sold. You've got the selling agent, the list price, selling price, listing date, sales date. Okay, so these are all the different things that we know about all of our information in our home sales. All righty. So there are some benefits to creating this or defining this group of data as a data table. So I'm going to do it real quick. So it's pretty simple to do. So I'm going to select the entire data and I'm going to hit Control T. I want to make sure that I have my table has headers checked. Now let's talk about that for a second. So the data is organized correctly. It's structured correctly. So each one of my columns has a clearly defined label, which you would always want to do as a good business practice. And because I've done that already, I'm going to be able to click here. My table has headers. And when I do that, boom, I have now actually defined this as a data table. So let's start with the basics. What is a data table in Excel? A basic data table in Excel is a defined structured object of columns and rows of related data, right? So when we talk about things like related data, when we talk about data tables, well, here's an easy way to remember what a structured data table is. So data tables are comprised of columns and rows, right? Columns and rows of records. So how does that work? Well, tables are comprised of fields, right? So fields would be your column heading. So transaction ID is a field, address is a field, city is a field, selling agent is a field, okay? Fields have values. So the address is a field value. Hernandez, selling agent, is a field value. A group of related field values is a record. So this row 3 right here, all of this, that is a record. So when you talk about data tables, you're breaking your data or you're organizing your data into records. Okay. Fields, field values, group of related field values is a record. Now inside Excel, you have the ability to actually say that this data is structured data and it is or should be a data table. Excuse me. That's what I just did. So I did that by hitting Control T on my keyboard. But before we do that, and I'm going to undo it so I can show you a couple different ways to make this thing happen. Okay. I want to show you how you can create data tables in Excel. And just like everything we do in Excel, there's several ways to do it. So the first way to do it is by selecting your entire data. Okay. I was able to do that by using the shortcut Control Shift and the arrow keys. Okay. So the first way that I can create a data table is by going to Insert. Okay. And notice I've got a whole group of options called tables here. And that's what I mentioned at the beginning. There's multiple types of tables that you can create inside Excel. This is not going to be a pivot table. Pivot tables, that's a different video. We're going to create a basic table. So I'm going to click Table just like so. Then I'm going to say yes by looking at the range. We verified that it's B2 through I91. And I'm going to click OK. So now what I've done is I have created a structured data table. Now remember I told you there's 3 ways to do everything in Excel most of the time. So the other ways that you can create a data table is I can hit Control T on my keyboard. That'll bring up Create Table. The other way is I can use Quick Analysis. So if I select my entire data, notice I have this option down here called Quick Analysis. If I click that, I can go to Tables and I can create a table that way. Okay, perfect. So you're probably asking yourself, I mean, the data looks the same, it's organized the same. Are there really any benefits for me to actually defining this as a data table? Well, there's a bunch of things. None of them are really make or break, but they just make your life easier. It just makes it a little bit smoother, and it helps you focus on the data versus just trying to make sense of what all the stuff's on, all the records that are on your screen. So when I say focus on the data, let me give you some examples of what I mean. So first thing you'll notice is there's a pretty decent amount of data in this data table. Not a ton, but a little bit. As I start to scroll down, watch row 2 right here. So you see here are my column headings. So as I scroll down, look at what happens. Because I've defined this as a data table, it's going to automatically freeze the first row when I scroll the table off screen. That doesn't happen on its own. So if this was not defined as a table, right? If I Control Z this, if I start scrolling down, now I have to remember, is that the listing price? Is that the selling price, or vice versa? Okay. So that's just something to think about. First benefit is the columns will automatically lock when scrolling off screen. Okay. So second thing that happens, it's really handy with working with data tables, is you get built-in data table styles, right? So it's really quick, fast formatting that can help make your table easy to read, and it can just honestly make it look better, right? So for example, when I go to my table styles up here in the ribbon, I can click, 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 and change all of those things. Now, I want you to know that the ribbon has something special happening. So when I click off of my data table, take a look at the ribbon. So I've got Home, Insert, Draw, Page Layout, Formulas, Data, Review, Developer, and Power Pivot. So now Developer and Power Pivot are add-ins that I've got turned on my particular computer. Those are not necessarily things that you would have nor need, but they can be added if you're working with them, right? What I want you to notice though is that when I click that special table object, I now get a new tab in the ribbon called Table Design. Now under Table Design in the ribbon, which is only active when I have a table selected, right? So nothing, Table Design, nothing, Table Design. Okay, I have the ability to customize this table as I see fit. And one of the things I can customize would be the table styles. Now, there are a lot of table styles. Some are ADA compliant, some are not. It really is up to you on what works for you and your business. So I would stick to whatever guidelines you have at your business on what colors and fonts and contrasts to use, but you can go through those and make those changes very quickly. Okay, I'll just stick with the default. That's not the default. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so a couple other things you can do with your data tables that are really, really interesting. Because the data table is a recognized object, you can actually give the object a name. So I can go up here in the upper left-hand corner. So I'm in the Table Design tab. I have an option called Table Properties right here. So Properties, and I can give the table a name. So I will call this Sales. Okay, now you need to make sure you hit enter. And a couple little side notes about this. When you are naming a table, you have to use qualifying name conventions. So no spaces and no foreign characters. So I couldn't call this Sales Space Agent. See that? It won't let me do it because it's got a space in it. I couldn't call this Sales exclamation mark. It's not going to like that. The exclamation mark is a non-qualifying character. So if I wanted to put a space in, I can't, but what I could do is I could call it Sales with an underscore. Now that's going to work. Okay. So what are some benefits of naming your data object? Well, first of all, check out dynamic arrays. So if I jump over and I want to reference this table, say I wanted to use this table as part of a VLOOKUP or an XLOOKUP, I could do that, right? Except instead of me saying B2 through I91, instead of me doing that, you know what I can do? I can actually just use the name. See that? Sales totals. I can actually reference that. And when I hit enter, Boom, there's my table, just like that. Super handy. Now, what you just saw was a dynamic spill. That's covered in another video, but basically that's part of the new dynamic arrays that are included in Excel. Really awesome feature, but basically I was able to reference just the name of the data table, and it's going to automatically pull that entire data table into whatever I want. So if I was doing a VLOOKUP, I could all of a sudden say lookup a cell. I can start typing and I can reference that table just like so. Cool? Cool. So one of the benefits is being able to name your data table. Okay, give that object a name. What are some other things that are super handy? So all of the formatting automatically updates. So say, for example, I've got selling agent here and I wanted to include selling agent's first name. I could actually insert a column, and when I do, that formatting is going to automatically be in there, right? So all of a sudden I could call this first name. It's going to automatically include that. Same if I want to insert a record. So if I want to jump into the table and I want to insert a record, I can do that. And when I do, that formatting is going to automatically employ in there. So that's super handy as well. So I can automatically insert or remove columns and rows into my data table. So the two best benefits, arguably best benefits, that you get from when you're working with the data table is your ability to aggregate the data table very quickly. So let's talk about what that does. So when I say aggregate the data table, what does that even mean? Well, maybe I'm interested in knowing how much money we've made selling our homes. Or maybe I'm interested in knowing what the average selling price of all the homes that sold in the month of April were, right? Or that were put up for sale in the month of April were. Maybe I wanted to know that. Well, if I want to know that, you would know that I would want to use the average function, right? Well, instead of me having to actually write that function, aggregation is built into data tables. So if I click inside my data table and I go to table design and click total row in the table style options, it's going to give me a total row. Now what I can do is jump down here and I can automatically apply aggregation. So I can say, hey, average selling price. That tells me. I could say what the average listing price was. That tells me. Okay, super handy things. Okay, average selling price, average listing price. Aggregation is built in. Another benefit of data tables. Alrighty. So now what I would say is probably the best benefit of working with data table objects in Excel is structured referencing. So when I talk about structured referencing, what do I mean? Structured referencing. So if you were to take two cells, so say I've just got a number here like 2 and 2, and I wanted to add those together, you know that that would be M3 plus N3, and that tells me 4. So if I look at it, it uses the traditional A1 referencing technique that Excel is known for, right? So it's just saying M3, so column M, row 3, plus column N, row 3. Okay, that is called an A1 style reference. That's the default referencing technique in Excel. But Excel can do other types of referencing techniques, right? So as you've learned in other videos, it does R1C1 referencing, but what makes data table special is it uses something called structured referencing. So what do I mean? So maybe I'm interested in the difference, right? So we've got the list price of a house. So what is the list price? If you're selling your house and you want to sell it for an X amount of money, that's the listing price. So in this particular example, you're selling your house for $725,000. Okay. Now you probably know that oftentimes home sales are negotiable. They can sell for more or less than what they're asking for, depending on the state of the market. So in this particular case, they asked $725,000, but they received $645,250. So it was less than the selling price. So you know what we could do? We could look at percentage-wise what they asked for versus what they got. So I could just simply take the $645,250 and I could divide that by the $725,000, and it's going to tell me a percentage. Now it defaulted to currency. We don't want that. So I will quickly jump in and change that to percentage, and it'll tell me that I got 89% of my asking price. That's what that tells me. Now the math was not what we were talking about here. What I want you to look at is this. Okay. See this formula right here? You can look at it up in the formula bar. That should be new to you. That should seem odd to you. So if you've never seen this before, this is what you call a structured reference. Particularly, this is called an unqualified structured reference. So I would arguably say the best thing that data table objects do for you in Excel is it automatically employs structured referencing. So why is this super handy to you? So instead of you looking at a number, so 89%, say you're working with someone that's not familiar with Excel. So I look at this and go, hey, I got 89% of my ask. How did I do the math? Well, I can click it. If this was just using traditional Excel referencing, it would say G3 divided by F3. If you've got someone that's not used to Excel, they may not know what that means. However, this uses plain English, and it simply says it's the list price divided by the selling price. Now, it's not really plain English the way you think. It's simply telling you based on the column headings. Remember, data tables are comprised of fields. Fields have values, and a group of field values is a record. So what it's telling you is these are the fields within the table record that are being used to calculate the difference in selling price. That's what's happening there. Okay. So it's saying it's the selling price divided by the list price. That's telling me, hey, I got 89% of what I was asking. This that you see here is called a unqualified structured reference. Now there are fully qualified structured references as well. That is not something you would need here. However, I will quickly show you what a fully qualified structured reference looks like. Watch this. So say I create a new worksheet inside the workbook. And in that worksheet, I want to reference something from the data table that I was just working on. So if I go back in and I click a cell like so, notice that it gave me something special, right? So if I go back to this worksheet, it says sales data. Oh, here, let me click one. There we go. H3. So if I look at this, it's telling me, hey, sales data, exclamation mark, H3. That's what I referenced. So now this is called a fully qualified structured reference compared to an unqualified structured reference. What's the difference? So a fully qualified structured reference is something you use when you're referencing an object outside of the object. So I'm on a different workbook, or excuse me, a different worksheet inside the workbook, and I'm outside of the table that I've created. So it's saying, look in the sales data table, or excuse me, look at the sales data worksheet, H3 cell. Sales data worksheet, H3 cell. That's what it's telling me. That is a fully qualified structured reference. If I look at this, this is telling me, hey, selling price divided by listing price. That's an unqualified structured reference because you are writing a formula inside the object. So I don't need to say, whatever the name of this table is, I don't need to say sales total selling price divided by sales total listing price. Now I've got a whole nother video that talks about referencing in Excel, so that's not something you necessarily need to look at right now. If you're interested on the channel, you're welcome to go back in and click through and you'll see all kinds of things about cell referencing. But I just wanted to show you kind of short and sweet what makes data tables super handy, right? They automatically aggregate, they automatically fill. So you may have noticed here, I'll do this again. There we go. So if I do that math again, watch this. So I'll say take my selling price, divide that by my listing price. Watch this automatically complete the column. Boom. I didn't have to fill that down. It did it for me automatically. Just a lot of super helpful time-saving tips and tricks. If you didn't work with data tables, like a lot of people don't, it's not going to be the end of the world, but it's a really helpful tool to make your data more organized, to help keep your data structured, and to help save you time. So hopefully this helps out, and we will be back and see you in the next lesson soon.